Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and to our first edition of Joe and Jay's Dark Crime series, where we will delve deep into crimes that have occurred around our local area and beyond. We're going to do this a little different from our Outspoken series and Men's Edition episodes that launch every Tuesday and mid-month Wednesday respectively. Our Dark Crimes episode will be sprinkled into the normal Outspoken time slots on occasion. Today's episode is going to be a two-parter, and Joe's going to give us a little rundown on what it's all about.
Yes, sure am. So on April 10th of 2001, the Fisher family's house exploded. Inside, Fisher's wife and two children were discovered dead. Their throats had been slit, and Mary had been shot in the back of the head. Robert Fisher, along with Mary's automobile, were missing. Police in Scottsdale, Arizona, identified him as the sole suspect in the killings. On April 20th, Mary's automobile was found in a woodland near Young, Arizona. And on June 29th, 2002, the FBI placed Fisher on its 10 most wanted list. However, on November 3rd, 2021, Fisher was removed from the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. Despite his removal from the top 10 list, Fisher remains a wanted fugitive. So let's get into this.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Joe and Jay's Dark Crime series. So here we are in episode 1, and Joe gave you a little bit of a synopsis on what's going on here. So, yeah, what a crazy story. I mean, this Robert Fisher guy, it's amazing to believe that he's out there somewhere, and they haven't found him. I mean,
Right.
there was a sighting, right? I don't know if that's something you're gonna.
There's been many sightings of Rob Fisher. He is your typical male. You know, he just looks like an average guy, and so everybody kind of matches the description when
looks average. Yeah,
correct. So let's talk about Robert William Fisher. He was born in April 13th, so not too long ago, 1961. So that makes him what 63 years old. He was born in Brooklyn, New York. And he's one of 3 kids. He has 2 sisters. His father was William Fisher. He was a banker, and then his mom was just a stay-at-home mom. Her name was Jan Howell. The parents divorced in 1976, which at the time Fisher was 15 years old. And as you know, a lot of these times when that happens in a family, there's a lot of mixed emotions and feelings with divorce. And so Fisher carried a lot of anger in him, a lot of bitterness, mostly towards his mother for leaving his dad or leaving them. So they ultimately moved with their dad to Arizona, and they attended Saguaro High School in Tucson. So all the kids came with William Fisher and left Jan Howell from wherever they were coming from, and so he was raised in Arizona, and being raised out here, as you could see out in the desert, just a normal guy, right? Going to school, things like that. I know that a lot of his people that they've talked to, these investigators going back and trying to, or the FBI even trying to create some kind of a profile on him, did a lot of interviews with people from his childhood and his teenage and of course in his adulthood, trying to figure out a little bit about Robert Fisher. The guy, as I said, grew up in Arizona. He eventually enlisted into the U.S. Navy, and he even had a little attempted to join the SEALs, right, which was unsuccessful. I know a lot of his friends that knew him said that he was an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and fisherman. So the guy was real, which is a lot. There's a lot of people in Arizona, right? That's you look at that, you don't think like, oh my god, that says a lot of things. This guy's a serial killer, right, or anything like that, or to think that there's anything wrong with someone, because that's what you do in Arizona. You do a lot of outdoor activities, hunting and fishing and things like that. So clearly, that's not something that's going to stick out like, oh, I see what's going on here, right? And as far as we know, the guy lived a normal life. He loved his family, things like that. Stuff never just stuck out with Fisher. Of course, people didn't live with him in his house, so that's where the other side of Robert Fisher was. So I don't know if you know this, but he worked as a firefighter in Borrego Springs, was
Yeah, Borrego
again
Springs.
somewhere
Yeah.
that we're familiar with, right? We're
Right.
natives of California, and we know exactly where Borrego Springs. And to think that this guy who committed this horrific crime here in Arizona, which we're at, came from Borrego Springs, which we know where that's at, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. So
It's almost like it hits close to home because
it,
it seems like, would we have ever ran into this guy at one point? I mean,
right.
the world's big and everything, but it's just crazy that we would be in such proximity to a guy like this.
If the timelines were different, we probably would have ran into him because I don't know if you recall, back in my entrepreneur days, I had a restaurant near that area where a
Yeah.
lot of people from Borrego Springs would come and dine. So
Yeah.
if it was a different timeline, I am 100% sure he probably would have stopped by and had something to eat there. So that's how close it is to our proximity. So
Right.
it's kind of different, right? So, but he was forced to retire at an early age because of a back injury while being a firefighter. And he moved his family back to Arizona, where they ultimately ended up living in Scottsdale, Arizona, which we're also familiar with that area.
Right.
Um, he he married Mary Cooper in 1987. So it's funny, and not this crime clearly is not funny, but it's crazy that we're looking at these dates, and for us it doesn't seem that long ago, right? We're like, oh,
Right.
1987, but to I'm sure our listeners are like, oh, that's so old. That happened such a long time. Well, it really
That
didn't
depends
for
on the
us.
list. Depends on the listener, I guess.
Very true. Yeah. So, however, everyone saw Fisher. That he would go to church. He was devout. He was talked about his family a lot. But again, those are the outside, right? That's what we're looking at from the outside. We don't know what's happening inside his head. We don't know what's going on within his family. Those are secrets that people keep. Like I could be talking to a complete stranger in the street, and for all I know, he's a normal human being, but
Right.
his thought process or what crimes he might have committed, or if he just got out of prison, or if he just ended up beating the heck out of somebody 10 minutes before we bumped into him, we don't know these things, right? These are kind of like the dark secrets that people carry until they're either caught or they confess to them. And so he was known to be a very cruel, distant, and controlling kind of person towards Mary, right? So, but people wouldn't see that. Those were things that were kept inside the household. So the guy was let's say average guy, kind of tall, but controlling. Now think about a female that's a little bit smaller than that. It's a kind of intimidating, right? So you're not gonna
Right.
but again, you could only push so far before all of a sudden you get some resistance and there's some pushing back. Most of their arguments were it was crazy because I feel like these are like the all time arguments that people in relationships have nowadays, and it was about sex and money, right? So was it that? And again, we will not know this because we don't know where he's at. But was it the fact that they were devout in their religion, that she wasn't as sexually active as he was? Was there something in his head that kind of like led him to want to um, have an excessive amount of sex? What was it about the money? What are those things? Um, we don't know that. We'll never know that until he's
Right.
caught, right? So when he moved to Arizona and he left the job as being a firefighter because of his back injury, he got into the medical field. So he became a surgical catheter technician and a respiratory therapist. He did this at the Scottsdale Memorial Hospital Osborne, which now today is called the Honor Health Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center.
Yeah. Honor
Um,
Health. Yeah.
so he worked there, and so that's where you develop. People develop friendships in your workplace, and this is where you get to know people, and only enough, right, of what they portray to be or what they want you to know. Um, so along with his chronic back pain, his bitterness, and his controlling ways, Fisher would lash out towards his family. Like his family took the blunt of it, because like most controlling, abusive men, they don't do it to people around them, friends or anything like that, because they probably know they're going to get whooped if you talk to somebody like that, right? You talk to a guy the way you talk to, he's going to, you're going to pick your teeth up
Right.
from the ground. So of course, most of this lashing out came from a dark place. The guy had a back injury that he suffered for a long time. He had surgery, but even with that corrective surgery, he still wasn't right. He walked a certain way, kind of erect, upright, because of that back pain. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the characteristics that if you see someone kind of walking erect, kind of looks like this guy, that might be him, right? Because a lot of people that have had spottings of Robert Fisher, these are some of the characteristics they see. But because of those pains, I think that he was carrying, and then of course the bitterness of their parents' separation that he carried as a young man, all these were just piled in his head, right? And we've talked about this in our men's edition. Men don't talk about their problems. Men keep them inside, right? They don't,
Right.
they're not channeled anywhere unless it's channeled directly into hurting someone, in this case his family, right? So that's kind of important to know as to why we talk about, make sure people are talking about their problems and what's going on in their head, because we wouldn't know what's going on unless we pry into it, right? So anyway, there was a situation that they talked about, I guess, in gathering this profile about him, where Fisher actually turned the water hose onto Mary because he felt that she spoke out of turn, right? And that's kind of crazy, right? Could you imagine you're outside talking, blah blah blah, and then he's saying something and she speaks out of turn, and you just turn the hose and like splash it, like just, hey, shut up.
It shuts its mouth or it gets the hose
Yeah,
again.
it gets the hose, right? So
Right.
but these are really, like, I think today, red flags for anybody. But again, when someone's
Absolutely.
in a relationship, sometimes they get blind to these things. Another thing was, like, you couldn't paint these walls any color other than white. They had to stay white. You couldn't paint them any color. And then he also had it was his decision what pictures and how many go on the wall. I mean, that was how controlling he was. Now, when you have
Yeah, it's
someone that
crazy.
controlling,
That's that
there
whole sleeping with the enemy vibes,
yeah, but think about that. Now you got this guy that's just controlling every aspect of your life. I mean, there's going to be a point where Mary's going to say, "Dude, enough's enough." Yeah, I'm scared of you, but I'm not going to tolerate this, right? And so to understand what's going on in his head, you have to understand everything that's kind of compounding into Robert Fisher, not justifying his actions, but justifying his thought process in becoming that
Right.
monster that he is. Um, another thing was, and trust me, this is something we all did, that we were involved in or happened to us. So there was an incident where he felt very embarrassed. So again, we talked about, he was an avid hunter, he's outdoorsman, loves to fish, things like that. That's what you do in Arizona. He was so embarrassed of it. He had two children, a boy and a girl, and he was so embarrassed of his son because he didn't like doing that. Can you imagine being a parent and saying you're embarrassed of your child because they don't like to hunt, they don't like to
Right.
fish, or be outdoors? I would have to say that about my daughter. She don't like any of that, but that doesn't make her an evil person, right? Um, again, and that's, again, speaking to the psyche of Robert Fisher, right? This guy is just deluded. He's got so much going on, and he can't differentiate between his loved ones and reality. And I just feel like there's so much going on in his head that it's diluted now. There was also an incident where they were out boating, having a good time out. There's a lot of lakes in Arizona. So he was out in the
Right.
boat, enjoying the thing. His daughter didn't know how to swim. So you know what he did? He grabbed her and threw her overboard. Everybody was screaming. The daughter was screaming. He pulled her up. He's like, kind of laughed about it. So, you start thinking about that. You're like, that's your daughter in the middle of the lake. Now, I get it. We all got thrown in the pool. I got thrown in a pool to learn how to swim, right? My brothers did it. My dad did it.
Yeah, I
In
did
a
too.
in a controlled environment, right?
Right.
We
Right.
were in the pool, right?
Yeah.
And people were there. My brothers were in the pool. There's just all kinds of stuff going on. He in the middle of the lake. Could you imagine if you just started going down and lakes, you can't, they're not clear. It's not the Caribbean. So things like that, I mean, were red flags to me. Like, I don't know. What do you think? Would you think that's a red flag? You see this guy's behavior that way, very
Yeah.
erratic, very like out there. And you start thinking like, at one point you're like, that's kind of funny, and then you start thinking that is a little twisted, bro. You know,
Yeah. Well, going back to you said he like she said something that he didn't like. Mary said something he didn't like, and he like squirts her with a hose.
yeah,
Now, it it gets hot here, and in the summer, and if you're with your significant other, spouse, whatever, and you're just playing around and you like start squirting each other or something, that's a whole different thing. But because somebody said something and you do that, that's yeah, that's really weird.
it is, and
And it's kind of childish. It's like your um reptilian brain is kicked in, and you're doing something because you don't like something, so you're lashing out, kind of
correct.
deal.
Correct. So think about it. Now you got this. You got a husband. Put yourself in Mary's shoes, or even in the kid's shoes. You have this husband who is distant, right? He keeps him a distance from people, from family, because again, the trauma is childhood trauma from the parents' divorce. Some people just don't know how to deal with that. And again, when you store these things inside, it compounds to with other issues and other issues and other issues, and ultimately you come to a breaking point. So you have that his bitterness from the divorce. You have him his fear of getting close to family because he might lose them, because that's a thought process when parents divorces. Now I lost my parents or my mom or my dad. I'm going to lose family if I get too close and love them. I'm going to lose them as well. You had the controlling factors where hey, no, these stay white. I don't want them any other color. That's too many pictures. Take it down. Mary used to. She did quilting. Or what do you call that? Is that quilting? Is that what you call it? She made quilts.
Like
I'm gonna say it that way.
kind of macrame or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
quilting. Yeah.
yeah. Isn't that a rapper? Oh no, it's Macklemore. But anyway, the so she made, but she couldn't put them on the walls. You know how most people, they'll put them on the walls as a decoration. They'll put like a little hang them off just to show off what you created. And he wouldn't allow that. He would say, put them in the closet. And after a while, he's all, you haven't gotten rid of that yet? Like he had no, just knowing him, just this little bit that we've talked about, he did not create any type of bond with people. Everything was things that were eradicated: hunting, fishing, right? Walls stayed neutral. Pictures, too many, put them down. Any kind of things that you did, any homebodied, if you create a quilt, you're like, put it away, hide it, put it in the closet. After a while, it's like, that's too many, get rid of it. Like, he would never create something that created a connection, right? He always
Yeah.
avoided that, from what it seems. Correct. So now you got that. You got the fact that he squirted with water because he thought she talked out of turn, threw his daughter in the lake, embarrassed by his son. You would think that at one point Mary was like, "What the heck is going on, right, with this guy?" So this is the '90s. It's not like this is the '60s, right? In the '60s, it was a little bit more tolerated, right? Because that was just a way of life. You married this one person, and that's it. One person, one life. That's it. You're done. Correct. And
Right.
with her, this is now the '80s. We're talking the '90s. I mean, I'm sorry, the '90s. They got married in '87, I think. So this is now the '90s. So the '90s is a little different, bro. Now the women's movement. You got all kinds of things happening. Women aren't standing down anymore. They're like, you don't touch me, you don't do this. But it takes a little bit longer. Of course, it's not as it is now, right? Where like, touch me, you're calling the cops, or touch me, I'm beating you with this 2x4, right? But it was still a buildup, correct? But not as bad as back in the '60s or '70s where you just tolerated it, right? So
Right.
it's building up and it's building up, and at one point you're starting to think like, I'm really getting tired of this guy's behavior towards me and the children, because now if it's you, a lot of times you'll take it, right? As a woman, if you're like, all right, you know what, maybe I need to change this, maybe I'm not doing this, maybe you start doubting the things that you do, and you start questioning your efforts, and you kind of take the blame as a woman. But you add your children into that, all bets are off.
Right.
You're
Right.
not Mama Bear come out, right? You ain't
Yeah.
touch. You're not going to
Exactly.
do that to the kids. You could try to psychoanalyze me. You could try to mentally exhaust me, but you're not doing that to our kids, right? And and
Yeah.
and so at one point, I would assume that Mary got to that point, right? So, and again, when the FBI get all this information, interviewing all these people, they talked to his mom, and she one of the things that she mentioned is what Fisher that they talked about was Fisher's mom was yes sir, something that we just talked about back in the 60s. Yes sir, I do, this is what
Yep.
you do. William Fisher was like, you're gonna do this, woman, and she was like, yes sir, right? That was the kind of relationship they had. And in seeing the the mom was kind of involved in his life, in his son's life, she kind of noticed a lot of these things of her dad's traits, of her husband's traits in her son.
In her son, right?
Yeah, when they got married, he's like, oh my god, am I seeing my ex-husband William in our son, right? And so, and you have to consider, women handle things differently. They handle traumas differently. And this is probably why we don't hear a lot about his sisters, because they didn't take it and carry it like he did, right? Robert carried that like a cross to burden, and he did that. So Fisher, another thing about Fisher that people noticed, that he wouldn't socialize with family because he had this tremendous fear of getting too close and losing them, right? And again, that comes from that trauma of that horrible. It was a bad divorce, and so it came from that. Again, his mom, got tired of that too, being the yes sir kind of wife, and taking that sort of abuse. So now she sees that in her son, and now Mary, Robert's wife, is getting that same. I'm getting tired of this. You're doing too much. And it's not healthy for our kids. So his behavior grew more erratic through the years. It wasn't getting any better, right? So what happens, right? Something we talk about in men's edition as well is like, what happens when you deal with a problem? It compounds, right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to take even just the smallest of things to break,
pop off,
right? And that's when you start going into these dangerous areas, right? Because what are some of the things that you hear when you have these murders? Right, there was another one coming up in one of our series that involved law enforcement officers, and hey, it's one of that, what's that mentality? If I can't have you, no one will, right? It's that obsessive compulsive behavior that again, kind of like Robert Fisher, very controlling. This is it. Now, if you don't love me, then no one's going to love you. I can't love you, then no one can, and then they act on those emotions, those behaviors, those characteristics that drive them into borderline insanity, right? And then they act out on those, and what happens? You have these horrible, horrific crimes that happen. So it's building up. His behavior just getting more erratic, more out of control, and it's just building and building and building. And so as people, and he's still going out hunting, right? He's still doing all these other activities, doing all kinds of stuff. There was
he went out hunting like 2 weeks before the whole thing goes down, right? Like 2 weeks he's out with his friends in the he would go up to the Tonto National Forest,
right.
So it's up around the Payson area.
Yeah. We're that heading towards Young. So he was very familiar with the area.
Correct. Yeah.
So he knew that. So
and Young's a crazy area, because to find out that that's where they ultimately found, that was his wife's car.
Yeah. She had a Toyota 4Runner.
4Runner, yeah. Young's I've been there. It takes, you go down dirt roads, man. Yeah. It takes a while to get there.
It's a foresty area. It's
very much so.
Yeah.
It was very purposeful that he went there. That wasn't a I think I'll just go here, randomness. He knew about that place. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, he knew. It clearly seemed like he might have had a plan, right? But we don't know, right?
Who knows? Yeah.
So as his behavior grew more erratic, he started doing just weirder things. For example, some of his buddies that go out hunting, they said that one time they witnessed him after killing an elk. He smeared the blood in his face, like this. I'm talking. What is
he's the deer hunter.
Yeah, bro. Like he took that serious. Like, this is my kill. And I get it. There are certain things that hunters do when they get their first kill, either of their life or of the season, whatever it is. That, there's traditions that you do. I mean, but you're putting blood on your face, man. That's just like. And again, that act alone, not a big deal, right? Some people grab mud, they throw it under their eyes, they're like, let's do this. All of a sudden they're out there and weekend warrior in the whole
Right.
weekend, right? You're just playing a role.
Rambo all of a sudden,
All of a sudden, right? All of a sudden, you're smearing elk blood on you. You're like Predator now, bro. You know what I mean? You're
I got to
coming
tell you,
after.
man, if you and I were to go out hunting with a bunch of guys and one of the guys did that, I'd be like, all right, I'm packing up, going home. This is weird. Like, I don't think I'd stick around for very long if somebody did that. Now, you see, and there's the key, man. The difference is like you and I, if I was like, I come up and put blood on you or something, you did, it's like we know who we are. And that's whether it's joking, kind of like the water hose thing I was talking about earlier.
Right.
You're kind of playing and you splash each other. Who cares? But it's context and a lot of other things that you have to know your audience, as a human being. And that just sounds creepy. It sounds weird. Like, why would you
now add that to all the other weirdness? Now his friends wouldn't know. I'm sorry, his friends wouldn't know that because he keeps all that behind closed doors at home. So his friends wouldn't know that he's hosing down his wife because she peeks out of turn, or that you can't paint that wall any other color like fuchsia, which is a lovely color. You can't put more pictures. You need to put
your whole bedroom.
That's it. You got to put your quilts in the closet, or I'm gonna throw my kid in the lake so she can learn how to swim, or I'm so this. All these start adding up. You're like, what the heck is wrong with this guy, right? And these are the things that now, if it was me and we killed a deer, I'd probably get some blood and put the sign of the cross on your forehead and tell you, the power of Christ compel thee, right? Try to get the devil out of you, but those are things that you and I would do.
Right.
But we know each other. We know
it's
the
context.
Correct. Another incident that occurred is there was a family out just camping, right? And this guy snuck behind him and just emptied the magazine right behind him, scared the heck out of him. I mean, now if you and I were with someone that, all right, so maybe for me the smeared blood on your face wasn't too much. This is his first kill of the season or whatever. I'm like, all right, not too bad for me, right? But then he does something like that, I'd be like, all right, this dude's done. I'm out, man. This guy's like, what? That's like the first thing you talk about in gun safety is you don't do stupid things like that. That round's coming
not
down,
at all, man.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just, you start now as a friend from the outside looking in. Now I'd be like, all right, this guy's a little weird. Why? That's not acceptable to do that. Like, how would you go behind some total strangers, and just let loose that entire magazine? That's
and you think about it, like I could imagine again scenario, us being there, that guy, he's a friend of a friend of a friend or something. We'd be pissed at him.
Oh yeah.
Like super pissed.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And even if he didn't do it to us, if he did it to somebody else in our party, be like, bro, that's one of the most unsafe things. Plus, you do that to somebody, they don't have hearing protection on you,
right. But think about it. It's a family. If there's kids there, oh, bro, my rifle's aiming at you because I don't know what your intent is.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You don't do that in a campground of strangers. So again, now, hey, okay, if I was his buddies, so if I was Fisher's friends, I'd be like, all right, this dude's smearing blood all over his face. Now he's going off shooting rounds in the air, which we know is a very dangerous act. Many people die every year during 4th of July because they shoot guns in the air.
And New Year's,
and New Year's, correct. And so you're like thinking like that's not, this guy's like, bro, no, I'm not gonna go hunting with you, bro.
Man.
Yeah. So, and then there was another incident. He shot a stray pit bull. He was coming out of his house one day in Scottsdale, and there was a stray pit bull in the neighborhood, and I guess he called his dog as his dog came out, and that stray just attacked his dog, which he had a Labrador, and he went out there and he shot the dog. Pop! Right? The animal control came, found the dog, and blah blah. But even today, they believe that he set that up because he wanted to shoot that dog. Like, he wanted to do it. And you start thinking about them like, okay, now you're starting to add up a couple of things now, But again, the police.
So that particular story, his dog was fine?
I think so. I think his dog was fine because he had his dog with him. He took his dog up when he went to Young. and he left it up there. So I think the dog was fine. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, because you think about it, man. A pit bull gets a hold that's truly mean and
it was
everything.
a
Gets a
mix
hold of
too.
your dog or whatever dog, dude. They're tearing it up pretty bad,
Right,
And
right.
so, yeah, that sounds a little fishy.
Yeah. So, but he like I said, they've truly believed that they. But again, you're not going to know these things, right? Because they're all separate incidents, different audiences every time.
Right.
Mary's dealing with the stuff inside the house. His buddies are dealing with the stuff in hunting, and now you have Scottsdale police dealing with just things in the exterior of his home. Which, looking at it, he's a normal guy. The guy works at a hospital.
Right. And
He's
again, to them, one-offs because they haven't seen
exactly normal
a
guy,
bunch of stuff.
normal guy,
Yeah.
right? He was defending his dog. That's what it is. But now you start putting all these things together, right? Now you're investigating something. You start putting all these things together. You're like, this guy was crazy. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you start like, what's going on? So this is something that you and I probably are going to kind of understand because of our other podcast with Men's Edition. Fisher was a very active member of the Scottsdale Baptist Church men's ministry. He was very involved in it, right? But he slowly began to withdraw months before the incident of the murders. He began to withdraw from his religion. Now, clearly, people had to notice that, right? Especially in the men's group. Friends around, things like that. Um, his wife, I'm sure, started to notice that. So I think, just think about it. When you have this erratic behavior, which is something that he does all the time, not just here and there. These are just some of the things that we're never going to know all the stuff that happened. You have to keep in mind that these things that were happening to Mary were probably things that she talked to her parents or to Robert Fisher's mom, and telling her, man, those are behaviors that my husband had. You need to leave, right? Because she's gone. We don't know what really happened. For all we know, there
Right.
was all kinds of stuff going on in there. So when the police actually talked to them about this crime, it's like, we never heard him yelling. He never yelled. We always heard her
Yeah.
yelling. It was always her that we heard, right? So that's crazy because now that to me, looking from the again outside in, that's a psycho. Where the guy doesn't yell, he
Yeah.
keeps a nice low monotone voice, in control of his motions and stuff like that until he's not. That's kind of crazy, right? I mean, think about it. This guy he
It's
controls
almost like kind of like a bipolar disorder of some kind, possibly. I don't know. I'm
yeah,
not a
but again,
psychologist, but
we'll never know, right? Because,
yeah.
but these were things that were compounding, and Mary was a firsthand witness to these things because it was happening to her and it was happening to her children. So in going to church and someone talking to, because he did seek for some kind of counseling when he was at church, for some family counseling, because the guy, he didn't want to lose his family. I think deep down inside, that was his connection to reality. That was his connection to his society, to being part of a normal society, was his marriage, right? And think about losing that and your kids is traumatic enough. And I think Mary got to the point where enough's enough. And I don't know if you remember in the beginning of this, we talked about some of the things he argued was sex and money, right?
Right.
So in his talking to the religious leaders of his church, he did confide in them that he did cheat on his wife with a prostitute. It was a masseuse, right? So he had now that guilt, right, that he's carrying. The fact that now Mary's starting to like fend for herself, or she's getting tired of it, and this is the thing, neighbors never heard him yelling. They only heard Mary. And some of the things that they would hear Mary saying was like, you're worthless, I could have done so much better than you, let's get a divorce. So now think about it. That's right there, I think, was the key word, a determination to all his combined anguish, his bitterness, his anger, everything that had to do with his childhood trauma made him
Right.
the man that he is. And then, of course, everything else that he created because of the man who he is. Now he heard that terrible word that started all this in his childhood, divorce, right? That's like a trigger word. Now he's losing
Right.
everything, right? And that's where it starts getting kind of scary,
Right. And the fact that she said things like, "You're worthless. I could have done so much better than you."
Correct.
These are, again, kind of mirroring off our Outspoken Men's Edition episodes. So guys have this, we're wired to take care of the female in our life, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
how we're wired. So when she feels like we are a disappointment to her, that's like the biggest sword they can slash into us, right?
Yeah.
You would say, "Oh, well, being cheated on, this and that." You'd be surprised. Men are very emotional when it comes to stuff like that because we care about our females so much. You wanna see a guy go completely crazy, do something to his female, and watch him
But this
go.
is almost an unhealthy desire of his wanting his family. It's very unhealthy, you
It
know.
is, and a lot of that, again, like you said, I believe stems back from, you know, like you said, his divorce, or his parents getting divorced. Now she's talking about that, so it's digging up childhood trauma that he's never obviously dealt with.
Correct.
And then and then them probably having a bunch, because we never saw the other side. You're never going to hear that story
No.
because typically, if somebody does get, everything that happened, they're really not going to talk really that bad about her. Now, your neighbors and stuff, may have a little bit clearer, uh, you know, honest opinion of what's going on, but who knows? Because again, after the fact, people change their opinions on what's going on. I know there was a deal, and the guy that was next, or the family next door to them, because they lived on like a cul-de-sac,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the cul-de-sac, they're on the right hand side if you're facing down towards the house, and on the left hand side there's a family that lives there. And the son, he moved in, you know he was pretty young, and he moved in back in the 80s or whatever, whenever they moved into the house. His name was Wade. And he said that uh, what's his name, Robert Fisher, was kind of a strange duck,
Yeah.
so, but they seemed like a normal family overall, couple kids, husband, wife,
White picket
typical
fence.
white picket fans. Yeah,
You know,
typical, you
American.
know yeah, total all American. I mean, he was a firefighter, then he works at the hospital. They both go to church, I believe. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. I believe her dad was a pastor. I don't know if it was at the church that they went to, but the Mary Fisher's dad was like, something, if he wasn't, he was like pretty big in the church,
Could have
right?
been. Yeah.
So they were all involved in the church and everything. So yeah, outside looking in, you would be like, all American family. He
Yeah.
goes
Normal.
hunting, she's, totally nothing,
Stay at home
nothing to
wife.
see here, guys.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here.
Your 2.1 kids. You got your 2 kids and a dog. It's just your
Yeah.
typical average family. And of course, in as this atomic bomb continued to build up and build up and build up, right? He was heard saying that he could not live without his family. You know, he didn't see the traumas that he created within his own family. He only saw the traumas that were created to him, that affected him, and so in not speaking about those traumas, it just compounded on top of each other, problem after problem, behavior characteristics. Everything just started to build up to create this person that was about um, the fuse about to get lit, right?
Yeah.
Um, he had, but again, this goes back to saying he had this intense fear of loss, right? Because of his childhood trauma of his parents' divorce, and so now add all these things, right? And what's the worst thing? The worst thing that a person who is controlling, has a controlling behavior, what is the worst thing they could lose?
Lose control.
They control. They lose
Yeah.
control. So now when you have Mary saying enough's enough, I want a divorce. Done. Nothing you say is going to change. It's over. You lit that fuse, right?
Yeah.
And
Instantly.
and then that's what you have, because now, like, okay, if I can't change your mind, I can't do this, I can't do that. What do I do? What do I do? And you already have that controlling factor. You have so many things going on. Now you're losing control of stuff, and it's just, man, So I don't know. I think this is getting good, man. I say, but you know what? I hate to do this, but I think we're going to leave you guys here.
Yeah, this is the cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Before we get into the good stuff.
yeah, we're gonna have a part 2 of this episode coming up, and we're gonna delve deep into like the actualities of things that happen and everything. This was just kind of to get you going on a little bit of the background of Robert
Yeah.
Fisher and Mary Fisher and their family and his growing up, and just some of the basics. We're gonna we'll do our part 2, and we'll have a lot of the
We get into
details,
the actual
a little bit more
details of the crime.
Yeah, I mean, I have the address of the home and everything. We'll show pictures and stuff, but you can research the stuff yourself. We're not going to put that stuff up here.
No.
Because
out of respect for the one, all the people involved and their families.
Right.
It's not. It's not.
And the actual house where it was at doesn't exist anymore, right? So they rebuilt a home. There's a totally unrelated new family living there.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, like on Breaking Bad and stuff like that. The house they used in that show, it's over there in New Mexico. People constantly go there and throw pizzas on the roof and stuff because to reenact, the show. And those people they're tired of people going there all the time and everything. I could imagine these folks probably.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because there's a lot of people out there that like to go to these crime scenes, and that gets, I think that gets old after a while.
And it's almost like that specific house, it's kind of like erased from existence.
Yeah.
Because the house that, ultimately burnt down was completely demolished and a brand new, totally different house was built there. Yeah. So it's, even if you went there, you're not seeing anything of what you would have saw back in what was it, 2001?
Yes,
is when everything went down.
2001. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us for our new series here, Dark Crimes, and hopefully you enjoyed this. And we're going to have a lot more of these again.
Yeah, tune in next week for the follow up and the end of this crime with Robert William Fisher.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys dig it and come back and see us. And again, these are going to take the place of some of our standard Outspoken issues that we have on Tuesdays. And but we're not going to have them every Tuesday. It'll just be randomly sprinkled in whenever we do some research, because these take a little bit more research and stuff, right?
I was about to say these take a little bit longer to research. You got to get in there. You got to actually look at some of these reports, police reports and things like that. So it takes time and something that we do not have.
It's not like,
but for you guys, look at us. You know what I mean?
We'll do whatever we can for you guys.
There you go. So I like to hear right there.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. You can check us out on all of our social media channels at Linktree /Joe and Jay Outspoken. You guys have a wonderful week, and tune back in next week and see how this all ends up.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
See ya.
All right, bye.